Hello, hello. Okay, good morning. Thank you all for coming. I got one more person coming in. My name is Phil Boyle, and I'm a senior planner with the town of Corte Madera. And this is Sean Kennings from LAK and Associates. He's our planning consultant that's helping us out on this project. And thank you all for coming. Appreciate you spending your Saturday morning with us. For those in the TV audience, this is obviously being recorded. This is a duplicate workshop to what we had on Wednesday evening from 6 to 8. That was well attended, and that is online, as well as a lot of this information, this PowerPoint and Wednesday's PowerPoint, which are the same, will be online as well. So keep track of things that are going on our website, townofcortemadera.org. So we're going to go through PowerPoint presentation. Probably do it the same way we did it before, where I'll do the first half, see if we have any questions regarding that half, and then Sean will do the second half, and time for more questions. There are donuts available in the back. That's right. Good. That's why we have a full house, because of the donuts. Also a sign-up sheet. Also a lot of information from the state of California regarding cannabis. Also a handout with links that you can take a look at. My business cards are up there, should be up there. Feel free to take one of those and contact me if you have any questions. All right. So our agenda for today is welcoming background, talk about federal, state, and local regulations, what our current moratorium situation here in Corte Madera. And we'll talk about some of the local issues. We'll talk a little bit about the public survey, and then we'll have questions and answers and next steps. Regarding the public survey, has anybody taken the public survey yet? All right, great. So go ahead and hopefully everyone has a chance to take that. That will be up there for a while. We haven't set the exact date, but we'll certainly notify everybody ahead of time when we're going to take it down. All right, so our goals of our workshop are to provide information, share resources, gather opinions, and listen and engage in a respectful dialogue. So we're not going to be making any decisions. We're not going to be taking any votes. And this is just the early gathering of information and hearing your opinions and get the feedback from the community. Again, the town process, these workshops, the public survey. We'll probably have sort of an informational session before the Planning Commission, kind of similar to this. And then go back to and take their feedback, and then go back to the Planning Commission, probably with a draft ordinance, start getting into the details, and then maybe another Planning Commission hearing. So it could be anywhere from 2 to 3 or 2 or more Planning Commission hearings. All those will be publicly noticed. All are welcome. Then the Planning Commission will give a recommendation to the Town Council regarding that ordinance or regarding the next steps. And the Town Council will have, again, more public hearings, and with the goal of adopting an ordinance no later than September 2019, because that's when the moratorium ends. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. Yes?
Is that a set date? You can't extend it beyond the 19th?
Correct.
October.
Correct. September 2019 is the end of the moratorium. That cannot be extended. We've already extended that moratorium twice. So just a little bit of background, some definitions. Definition of cannabis versus marijuana. Often those terms are used interchangeably. Cannabis itself is the plant, is the entire plant, part of the hemp family, whereas marijuana refers to the dried leaves, flowers, stems, and seeds from the plant that one uses and consumes. THC is the psychoactive ingredient from the plant that gives one the effect. And another way cannabis and marijuana is consumed, as well as inhaling, is through infusions or edibles candies, drinks, and various things. Again, this is just a snapshot of some of the definitions. There's obviously a tremendous amount of information about cannabis and marijuana, and we're not going to try to cover it all, but just kind of give people an overview and whet your appetite, and hopefully you'll go onto the website and do some more research. Medicinal cannabis, and we're choosing to use medicinal cannabis. I think it's more commonly used rather than medical cannabis or other words. So medicinal cannabis is when one consumes it for medical purposes. The U.S. Food and Drug Administration has not recognized or approved cannabis plant as a medicine. So as many of you probably know, the federal government has not legalized cannabis to the level that the state of California, Oregon, Washington, and other states have. So that's number two. I don't know if I said. Just go back in definitions. Another term we'll be using is non-medicinal or adult use cannabis. And so that refers to using cannabis not for medical purposes, but for other purposes. And we use the term adult because one needs to be 21 to consume it legally. Non-medicinal just refers to it in that term. Recreational cannabis is often used as another same term, choosing not to use that just for a variety of different reasons. So I just want to get that nomenclature clear. Some of the history of California laws regarding cannabis. Back in 96, the citizens of California passed 215, which is the Compassionate Use Act, which legalized medicinal cannabis in California. In 2003, SB 420 was a Senate bill that established the the Medicinal Marijuana Program Act, which gave protections for cardholders and cooperatives who were using and distributing and selling medicinal marijuana. And then a number of Assembly bills and Senate bill in 2016 regulating cannabis and the Cannabis Regulation and Safety Act, which established regulations, standards, and testing for medicinal cannabis. And then moving more to back in 2016, Adult Use of Marijuana Act, and then just last year, the Medicinal and Adult Use Cannabis Regulation and Safety Act. A little bit more information about that. We call it SB 94 for short. It legalized adult medicinal use of cannabis. It did not change the local governments, our government's ability to regulate or tax medicinal or non-medicinal cannabis. And also it established that in January of this year, the state of California could allow non-medicinal businesses to be licensed and open up shop in local jurisdictions if the local jurisdiction didn't put a stop on it or a prohibition, which the town of Corte Madera did, and that's our moratorium. Basically, our moratorium says, which we enacted before January of this year, that said, hold on, Corte Madera doesn't want to move forward. We want to have these public workshops. We want to develop our own ordinance, and so we're basically putting a hold on things until, like I said before, September of 2019, when that hold expires. SB 94 also reconciled those two acts. It also put restrictions on smoking of cannabis, processing for personal use, growing, and the giving away of cannabis. We'll talk about those a little bit in the next slides. These are the three state entities that exist for monitoring and administrating cannabis. There's three listed there, all under the state of California. So the authority of the local government, what we have the power to do is we cannot restrict personal consumption. Personal consumption is, consuming it if you're over 21 or if you have a medical card. I should preface that we can restrict it in terms of the way we restrict the consumption of tobacco. So one cannot consume tobacco in public parks in certain areas in Corte Madera, and those restrictions can also apply to cannabis in Corte Madera. But we do have the authority to prohibit medicinal and non-medicinal businesses, which we're currently doing. We can determine, if we do want businesses in town, we can determine where they are, how many of them there are, where they operate. Good morning. Very similar to what we do for other businesses in town. If we decide to allow businesses, they will all need to get a state license, and we can also require them to have a use permit through the town of Corte Madera. And so they'll need to go through a process if we choose they'll need to go through a planning process and get a conditional use permit, and that will all be through the public process. We can also issue special licenses if we want. If the Corte Madera decides to have businesses, we can set up types of taxes and fees on those businesses. So again, repeating, our current moratorium was in response to Prop 64, and I pretty much went through that before. Again, expires specifically on September 19th, 2019. So it's currently allowed. Again, kind of into the details a little bit more. You have to be over 21. You are able to, again, this is the state of California rules that apply to Corte Madera. You're allowed to possess, if you're over 21, 28.5 grams, about an ounce, of non-concentrated, non-medicinal cannabis, or 8 grams of concentrated cannabis, or and/or various accessories. Cultivation, you're allowed you may possess, plant, cultivate, harvest, dry, and process up to 6 plants per residence, not per occupant who's over 21, but per residence, or on your property for personal use. The resident may also possess the cannabis product that they produce with the plants. Needs to be within a private residence or on private property, and it must be in a locked space and not visible or by the unaided eye from a public area. That's one thing we may get into when we develop our ordinance. Whether we want to allow folks to grow it outside, and if we want to put on additional restrictions for them growing it inside. The state of California does not allow us to prohibit people from growing cannabis inside. So those are kind of that's one thing we can't regulate. We can't prohibit, I should say. We can regulate it. So going back, what's not allowed is consuming cannabis in a public space, consuming it while driving, or being under the influence of it, smoking or vaping cannabis where you cannot consume tobacco, providing cannabis to minors under 21 for non-medicinal use. However, employers can maintain a drug-free workplace, or a cannabis-free workplace, I should say, much like they can, specific employers can regulate smoking, in their facility of tobacco, just so they can do the same for cannabis. No consuming of cannabis within 1,000 feet of a school, daycare center, or youth center. Commercial use is prohibited. Any cannabis-related businesses, again, that's back to our moratorium. The exception is our moratorium is silent on medicinal and non-medicinal deliveries from outside. So the product can be delivered from outside of Corte Madera into Corte Madera at this point. And you cannot possess over the limits. And again, possession is not allowed on the grounds of school or daycare center. So that concludes my half. I'll open it up to any questions. I think let's do the questions at the podium, because you'll be on, that way you'll be on camera and you'll be recorded, and we'll make sure we'll have the information. So any questions now, or you can also, we can hold questions to the end. That's fine as well. You can jump in
Simple question, and I'm going to record.
there. Okay.
So far, what have other towns in Marine done?
We will have a slide on that momentarily.
Another simple question.
Okay.
Chair. What's the difference between concentrated and non-concentrated?
So concentrated, neither Sean nor I are experts on this. My understanding is concentrated is you take the buds from the cannabis plant and you process them in such a way to extract the oils, and then you put those oils into a product. Okay, I'm gonna either go to the podium or we're gonna hand it over to Sean. Okay, hand it over to Sean. You can certainly ask your questions after Sean's. Thank you.
Morning, everyone. I'm Sean Kennings with LAK Associates. As Phil explained, I'm a consultant to the town, and I'm going to go through sort of some of the basic. Why don't you give me the? So what we're trying to do is develop an ordinance for whether or not some of these activities in town can be allowed. As Phil explained, under the state law, indoor cultivation is allowed by the law. However, the law also gives local jurisdictions the ability to develop their ordinance, which is why we're here soliciting, sort of giving you information, soliciting your feedback so that we can at some point develop an ordinance that either allows or prohibits these basic uses. So what we're going to go through today is essentially the very basics of what we can and cannot do here in the town. So cultivation, again, indoor cultivation, indoor possession of 6 plants is allowed by the law, and the town cannot prohibit that. What we can talk about is cultivation for outdoors. Can you do it? Where can you do it? How can you do it? We would talk about whether or not you can have a storefront. And a storefront or a non-storefront for medicinal or adult use, which we call a dispensary. Whether or not you'd actually have a physical location. Where in town would you have that? A non-storefront is normally called delivery. Can we issue licenses for a company in Corte Madera to deliver to Corte Madera residents or outside the town, or whether or not we would allow for deliveries from outside businesses into the town. Manufacturing testing is, to answer the question about concentrated, developing the actual product, but not have a storefront or not have a license to sell that off that license from that particular location, but to develop products for sale elsewhere. And then what we have as other is there are things called micro businesses. Micro businesses, I think you could best describe as almost like a brew pub, where you would actually cultivate, harvest, manufacture, and sell all on one site. And then what's called distributor or transportation. That's not delivery between a retail business and a buyer, but it would be delivery from maybe a manufacturer to a retailer, or from a manufacturer to a tester. So it's actually the transportation, almost like a DHL or a FedEx of cannabis products. So I'll go through those. So again, as Phil explained, the town cannot prohibit indoor cultivation of up to 6 plants. Indoor cultivation includes growing in your house, in a greenhouse on your property, in a place that's not visible from the public, in a locked and secured area. Now the town can reasonably regulate indoor cultivation in that the town could provide direction for how you would grow indoors, whether it has to be in a specific space, whether or not it has specific types of permits that would be required for like electrical or materials for how you would build that particular space. And again, the town can prohibit outdoor cultivation, and outdoor cultivation would essentially be on a part of your property. We would have to come up with design guidelines or setback guidelines for where you could do it on your property. Could it be seen from a public space? Is it near schools? Would it be, could you smell it from off your property? And the best way to sort of compare that to would be sort of like the keeping of chickens. Essentially, there are guidelines for if you're going to have chickens on your property. Does it smell? Is it noisy? Are there setbacks? Is it housed in a particular location? Again, going to cultivation, some of the things that we could consider would be issues surrounding the fire code or the building code, specifically for electrical permits, fire safety, venting, types of building materials. Would that cultivation be detectable from any property or any public right-of-way? Again, that's odors or visibility. Some of the things that we could consider for indoor cultivation then would be requiring a property owner to essentially get a permit to, even though it's allowed by the law, but you'd have to get a permit from the town that says I'm growing on my property. Again, whether or not you'd get a permit for fire safety and public health issues regarding electrical lamps or ventilation, or providing building materials such that you wouldn't create mold indoors. So moving on to some of the business licenses, there are 19 licenses that are issued by the state for the various types of cultivation, and this is not kind of the cultivation that you would consider in your house. This would be sort of a larger grow operation, you know. And as you can see, these are the cultivation licenses. There's the different sort of variations of indoor, outdoor, types of artificial light, how much you can grow. And then there are the 6 different licenses for businesses: manufacturing, testing, retailer, which is essentially a dispensary or delivery, distributor, which is the transportation to and from cannabis-related businesses, but not to individual buyers. And then again, the micro business type of license, which again would require you have to have 3 of these basic parameters, which would be cultivation, distribution, manufacturing, and retail. So it's sort of everything all in one. Dispensaries, as most people know, is actual storefront. You go in, the facility has the product on site. You would essentially be able to buy it like you would at any other commercial venture. The issue with dispensaries then, the town would have the ability to regulate the location, the appearance, the type of use. This is a particular facility called Harvest. They have one, I believe, in the city, but this one is out of San Diego. As you can see, there's no sort of medical or medicinal or recreational type of cannabis signage. There's nothing that would indicate off the street that this is a particular cannabis location. These facilities by state law have to be 600 feet away from any school or youth center, any kind of facility that has children. The town has the ability, if we were to allow these type of facilities, to make them further from school or youth centers. Again, we could regulate the signage, the appearance. A lot of these facilities have security, a doorman, because currently under state law they're not allowed to do banking under sort of the federal bank system, so they have a lot of cash. They end up closing out every day their cash and taking it off-site, so they do have security on these premises. Delivery, we call it it's called a non-storefront. So essentially, you have a business to sell cannabis. You sell the products. Obviously, you would have to register with the state. You'd have to get a license from the town if we allow it. These vehicles typically, although the picture here shows sort of a cannabis-related business, they would probably be unmarked, not like a pizza car with the hood or the roof sign, but it would be sort of a vehicle that you wouldn't be able to detect. Again, only licensed operations would be able to deliver. Right now, the state law prevents the town from prohibition of delivery through the town. Essentially, any delivery business that has a state license can use town streets to go from, Mill Valley to San Anselmo through the town. And state laws right now, I believe there is a law that might be passed later this year that will prevent towns from prohibiting delivery service altogether. So we might be able to prohibit licensing in the town, but essentially state law might allow delivery service to go deliver anywhere within the town. So processing and testing, these two photos in this slide, this is a building on the top in Novato. The bottom is a building in Berkeley. As you can see, there's no sort of signage that calls out what it's doing inside. Again, manufacturing testing is the creation of the products, testing of the products. Under the state law, there's a lot of regulations under which these products have to adhere to in order to be sold in their packaging. They have to have certain sort of content, explanation, and what have you. And again, the manufacturing testing, the ordinance then would dictate where in town would we allow that if we were to allow it. How would those facilities be monitored? And whether or not, again, all these things are whether or not we would allow the business license and how would we tax it if so. To answer the question earlier, what are some of the other jurisdictions in the Marin County? So right now, the only storefront facility is a medicinal dispensary in Fairfax. That facility has been open for quite some time prior to the 2016 passing at the state. The County of Marin has just approved a non-storefront delivery licensing. They have 4 licenses that they have that they are going to allow. They're going through that process of approving those facilities. Santa Fe has just passed an ordinance that allows for limited testing throughout their commercial districts, and similar to Novato as that previous slide. You can see the third row, pretty much all the jurisdictions in the county prohibit dispensaries as storefronts. And there are several communities that permit or regulate outdoor cultivation. San Anselmo allows outdoor cultivation, and they regulate it such that it can't be seen from public spaces, and that it can't have an offensive odor to somebody who has a normal smell ability, I guess. Again, kind of like chicken coops. So really quickly, the purpose of the ordinance again, and again, this is just the beginning of this whole process, but is to come up with sort of the town's guidelines and regulations for allowing or prohibiting or regulating the various cannabis-related activities. Again, do we want to regulate personal cultivation either indoor or outdoor? What kind of licenses does the town want to administer? Do we want to allow for deliveries? Do we want to allow for storefronts or manufacturing testing? Again, where would those licenses be permitted? Which parts of town would be suitable for those types of businesses? And how, if any, buffers to youth centers and schools, do we want to allow the 600-foot mandated by state? Do we want to increase that? And again, the laws are always changing, so we want to keep up to date on that. Like I said, the delivery law, I believe, is going to be changed by the end of this year. And then the real quick, if we allow licenses, how do we want to tax them? Do we want to include an extra tax on top of the state tax? Do we want to create excise taxes for the town? And just a real summation slide. Obviously, a lot of people are passionate about the pros and cons. The cannabis business, obviously, has a lot of pro-related talking points. There's a legal basis for it. They believe there's low crime, there's low taxation. It's a simple, streamlined process. You'd have a dependable workforce because of the cannabis regulated business. And again, the community, there are some concerns about public health and safety, additional crime, limiting the youth uses for the youth, and again, advertising and where it's directed. So as Phil said, we will take your questions. I think it's best if you go up to the podium and use the microphone. That way we can have it for our purposes when we go back and create some of the public comments so that we can inform the ordinance and the preparation of that. There is a public survey online. If you haven't taken it, we urge you to take it. It is anonymous, but there is a provision. We'd like you to put your address, or at least say if you're a Corte Madera resident, so we can have better information. And if you do speak at the podium, we want to keep it to 3 minutes, and we want to urge you to be respectful of your neighbors and let the people talk. And I think if you have more than one question, keep it to 3 minutes. And if after everyone else has spoken, you can come back up again.
Sorry, are we talking about asking you questions, or are you asking for input from people on the issue?
Both.
Both.
Okay.
All the above.
Oh, and if you can say your name and whether or not you live in town. You don't have to give an address, but.
Sure. Peter Masick, and I do live here in Corte Madera. And I just want to thank you for doing this. I think this has been very informative.
Make sure that mic's on here. Okay, you can start again. Thank you.
Sure. My name is Peter Masick, and yes, I do live here in Corte Madera. And I just want to thank you for doing this. I think it's been informative. Appreciate the reasoned approach to the issue. Brought up some issues I hadn't really thought about. I guess my main comment is I hope the town will, go with the idea that the law did pass and it is legal, and it passed overwhelmingly in Marin. And the fact that Marin towns have been very, very slow about allowing dispensaries and retail in particular is a little disconcerting, just because we're losing a lot of tax money to San Francisco and to, I guess it's Alameda County, and to Sonoma County. And that's just at the sort of retail personal consumption level. And honestly, I guess my point of view, which I don't see how anything a town of 10,000 people, that's like 2 square miles, does, is going to have any impact on the amount of marijuana that's consumed in Marin, or even in the town of Corte Madera. I mean, it's out there. There's a tremendous amount of marijuana out there. It's very easy to come by, and so I don't see why the town wouldn't want to participate in the retail economy part of it. Corte Madera does very well in terms of its sales taxes from the couple of big malls and other places. It's a big part of the economy. On the other hand, I do appreciate the approach you're taking in terms of larger commercial operations, and hope you can take an approach that basically sort of, for the personal growth and businesses, micro businesses, sort of separates out the little non-dangerous stuff and focuses on like public nuisance like smell, and then really hones in on things like solvents and large grow operations that might need to be more carefully regulated because of the safety factors involved. And just the final thing to add is that I see a lot of commentary, and I've heard it through my kids growing in the schools, about the influence on kids and all that. And the law is you have to be 21 to get it recreationally, and you have to be 18 to get it medical. And so I don't see how licensing a dispensary or not licensing a dispensary will change the availability of it to kids. I mean, it's out there for kids. They've been getting it since the 60s. And I don't think anything we do is going to have any impact on that. I think that's between parents and their kids and how they raise them. Thanks.
Thank you.
I'm Dorsey McTaggart, and I live in Corte Madera. I had not intended to speak, but that last comment that was offered requires that I do so. I'm strongly against facilitating any use of marijuana. I worked in the criminal courts. I saw the effect of it. I can remember now quite often the young man who appeared before us in the courts. I saw his deterioration. He began with marijuana. It does lead to other things. I don't see Corte Madera as facilitating the ability of people to get marijuana. And I urge the town council not to make that easier for people. It's so much easier not to get up here and speak. But it's like voting. It's easier not to vote, isn't it? But we have seen the result of people who don't vote. As a matter of fact, we have a gentleman in our audience today who might speak to that issue, who is a member of our council and who has seen the effect of people not voting. It's important to speak up if you're against marijuana. If you don't want to see our students use more of it, so many of them have said that, well, they legalized it. It must be okay. No, it's not okay. It's dangerous, and I don't want my loved ones to be killed on the roads, on the highways, because of alcohol. Alcohol is here, I'm sorry to say. But let's not make the use of marijuana any easier for people to be killed. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Lisa Spangler, and I am a resident of Corte Madera. I have tenants who insist they can grow marijuana on property, and that that creates a problem for me. I had a husband, my late husband was severely sick with marijuana. Excuse me, I'm so nervous. He was severely sick with cancer, and marijuana might have helped him. We didn't know. We asked the doctor. The doctor says, I don't prescribe it. You have to go somewhere and find it out about that. We just can't have these dispensaries with people who aren't medical people helping people who are sick. I really don't think there is such a thing as medicinal marijuana. Maybe it helps you sleep or whatever, but I don't think if you're sick, you should be going to these places to get a drug that's not regulated, that doctors can't prescribe. And there are many schools in our area, and I'm concerned about that. And I personally have a relative who has a problem with alcohol and is trying to stop that, but who says, I won't stop I can't stop drinking, but I'm going to try, but I'm never going to give up my marijuana. And that's part of it. And marijuana is stronger than when I was a kid. It is. And who do you really have in charge of these things? Do you have chemists who are following any kind of guidelines? Corte Madera is a small town, and if you can get it in Fairfax, then go to Fairfax. But I also think we need to regulate where and how it's grown in our town, because people have real strong feelings. They tell you it's legal, and you can't tell them what to do. That's how I feel about it. I really think we have to get a hold of this.
Thank you.
My name is Valéria Sasser. I live in Corte Madera. And I have a few questions, a few commentaries. I'll mix everything so maybe we can think about. First is about the children who needs the cannabidiol oil. I talked to two friends of mine who have children with severe seizures, and they could benefit immensely from this service, this delivery or something. So how could we be fair to the people that needs it, but not go into overwhelmingly making cannabis available in the city. So comes then my second concern is about safety and security in the communities. How are the statistics about increasing occurrences related to growth, commerce, or anything else of marijuana in the state, in the county? Does that increase? We remember the case in Santa Rosa that even had one murder recently because people out of the state came to try to steal their plants or something like that. Not cool. I didn't want to see that happening here. I have a strong opinion against marijuana around children and teenagers. Absolutely against that. Adults do whatever they want, but not children, not teenagers. I've seen people that use their whole lives and marijuana products, and the result is not cool. I don't want to have the children in Corte Madera and teens in that situation. Also in the papers that are available out there says that 15% reported in a survey not used in the past 30 days. Well, they are never going to report teens, and I didn't use that probably. So how trustworthy can be such a survey? Yes, if the community decides that it's going to happen here, I find the town very small for that, but if the majority decides for that, we sure have to tax it. Cannot just operate without any taxation here. And how my last concern is about how's the regulation on special lights needed to grow it indoors in Corte Madera. We live everywhere in Corte Madera, but the community on the other side of the freeway, that is the flood zone, the big one, everywhere else is in a high risk of fire here. So if we had fires related to those lamps in San Francisco and other communities, how can we make sure everything is correct, not in the danger of a short circuit and everything? So for that way, I would prefer having a neighbor having the plants outside. Most homes in Corte Madera have enough space outside to have up to 6 plants. Fine, okay, I have no problem with that for personal use. Again, adults can decide whatever they want to do. They are free to do whatever they want. I have no problem with that. But I think the safety of the community should come above anything.
Great. Actually, if you could just stay for 1 second, I just want to make sure I've got your 3 questions, and I think we can answer them all right now, relatively speaking. Your first one was, how can we assure or help to continue to have medicinal marijuana for young people who need it for medical purposes?
Correct.
And your second one was safety, referring to Sonoma County, where they had some break-ins, and so safety for personal grows. And then last was indoor cultivation, fire risk, that type of thing.
Correct.
Okay, great. So in terms of how our ordinance could facilitate or modify the ability for people to get it medicinally, I think mainly that's going to be if the community decides to have medicinal dispensaries in town. In terms of whether a doctor prescribes it to a child or not, and how the parents are involved in that, I don't know that realm, and I don't think we can get into that realm. That is the medical industry on what doctors can prescribe and what doctors can't prescribe.
Oh, I understand that, I just want to make sure they have access to it.
Okay, sorry. Okay. And then regarding safety, yes, that's certainly a concern. We had the chief of police here on Wednesday. He had a few comments. Certainly the police department will be involved. Security in terms of outdoor grows, are those visible? If they're visible, can people, jump the fence and steal them? That could lead to crime. So we'll certainly be looking at that. The indoor, as Sean mentioned, regulating indoor cultivation can go into a lot of different realms. If we decide to regulate that and require a building permit or some other specific permit, we would do the research and determine, okay, what does it take to have an indoor grow? You know, can you just plug in your socket and put in your light and grow one plant? Or if you're going to grow 6, you're going to need to upgrade your electrical panel in your house. Are you going to need to provide water? Are you going to need to build structures? And so we'll be in close consultation with the building department of, you know, what type of building permit exists today if you want to upgrade your electrical panel for a hot tub. You know, I know if you install a hot tub, you need a building permit, even a hot tub that you just plug in. So we'll get into that, and we'll also, if the community decides to go that route, and then how will that be enforced? And there's kind of a fine line of, will that, we're just making sure that any additional regulations that we adopt are enforceable, with of course public health and safety as the key. Does that answer your questions? Great, thank you. Anyone else?
Try to keep this brief. And so my name's Andrew Middleditch, and I live in Corte Madera. And I'm also a father of 2 small children who were here with my wife earlier. And I'm a psychiatrist practicing general adult psychiatry in San Francisco. And I certainly do not support the presence of any cannabis-related businesses in Corte Madera, and particularly the storefront businesses. And my concern is that, that they pose a risk to our community, and especially, I think, teenagers and children in our community. And the number one reason for this, in my opinion, is just the issue of access, and that when we discuss firearms, access, we know, increases the risk of the use of a firearm. And similarly with cannabis, the same thing is going to be true. And access is going to increase the ease of use, and the ease of use is going to increase the risk of abuse. And for those with a cannabis addiction, quick access is often the difference between relapse and sobriety. And so, but in particular, cannabis really poses a significant risk to the teenage brain. And current best evidence does demonstrate that there's an increased risk of psychosis associated with the use of cannabis among teenagers, and psychosis includes the disorder schizophrenia, which, as a psychiatrist, I'm very familiar with the devastation that schizophrenia can cause, and it is really among the most debilitating and severe mental health diagnoses, which causes lifelong impairment. And frequently, the impairment is so severe that a loving parent literally cannot even maintain a relationship with a child anymore because of the severity of the paranoia, hallucinations, and delusions. And a significant percentage of chronically homeless people in the Bay Area actually suffer from schizophrenia. Now, the risk of this may not be a large absolute risk, but it nonetheless is a risk that we should be aware of as a community. And so, in addition, regardless of age, cannabis impairs memory and cognition. I mean, the evidence for this is vast, and that impairment does last several days after use. In teens, there's some concern about irreversible cognitive impacts among heavy users. And obviously, cannabis cannot be safely combined with operating a motor vehicle, and when combined with other drugs like alcohol is going to compound the risk of motor impairment. And as a psychiatrist, I have just a couple thoughts about the medical dispensary issue. And sort of one would think that the medical dispensary might deserve sort of a special exemption, but I think that the current regulations around it are concerning, because in my practice, I essentially meet patients every week who have a marijuana card, and almost none have received their card for an evidence-based medical indication, and most readily admit that the card is for non-medical use. And some of these patients are addicted to cannabis, and use the medical cannabis card as a way to rationalize or to not deny their addiction. Others are simply unwittingly worsening or even causing a psychiatric disorder. But I think the aspect of the medical cannabis that concerns me the most, and maybe something for us to think about around delivery, is that the legal age to get a card is 18, not 21. And given that cannabis prescriptions are rarely written with appropriate patient evaluation and monitoring, essentially any 18-year-old high school student can easily procure a card and then access large amounts of cannabis. And
If I could just, sorry to interrupt, if I could just have you wrap up, I know.
Oh, I'm sorry. The
We'll let, if more people talk, you can come back for.
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
And
I've been outnumbered, go for
30
it.
seconds. I can just speak from personal experience as a psychiatrist that marijuana does enter high schools and middle schools in this manner, and these are precisely the ages at which it presents the most risk to the teenage brain. And so I just don't know that we want to facilitate increased access to cannabis in our community. Legalization obviously can alleviate certain social ills, but for people that need medical cannabis, I mean, the issue of having to go to Fairfax or the city is not, I don't think, significantly onerous, that we need a local dispensary. And I'll leave it there. Thanks for the extra time.
You're welcome. Thank you, and you can certainly come up for round two. I just wanted to give everybody the first round, and then we'll have round two. And also, I'm conscious I want everybody to be able to get out at noon, but also, once we end at noon, you're welcome to stay and chat with Sean and I. Just some.
Good morning. My name is Lucinda Smith. I did attend the Wednesday night meeting, which was far less civil. I have to say, you all get great marks. There were people that were rude. I am against implementing access, legalization within our town of any type of related subject with cannabis. I think that the cultivation has many problems. We don't have a lot of space in Corte Madera for this to be done outside. I think doing it inside is dangerous, has been adequately covered, I think. Thank you very much. I think that it takes a lot of resources that we do not have to allocate to this kind of a choice thing. Water, I'm of the understanding it takes something like 8 gallons per day per plant. That doesn't include what happens with all the chemicals that people add to it to grow and then are eliminated into our gutters and streams which go into the bay. So the pollution is a huge factor in my opinion. The odor, I don't want to smell somebody else's plants. I don't want to have anything to do with them. So I think that's unfair to me as a non-user to have to deal with. As far as dispensaries are concerned, I was in Colorado recently, and my brother was kind enough to point out a dispensary. It looked awful. It looked like kind of like a storefront that was just junk. The one that you showed on the slide, Harvest, looked reasonably good. They aren't going to look like that. Where are you going to put them? Are you going to put them over here in Town Hall or Town Center or at the Village, right next to Nordstrom's? I think it doesn't fit. It's not a good implementation of the town's authority to allow that kind of thing. It is a cash business. Cannot put the money into a bank, which is federally insured because it's against the law. It is not something that is going to minimize crime. Low crime is a misnomer. It's going to increase crime. And I think that is a big mistake that we should add on to our police department. If we were to permit one, I suggest that you limit it to one license. One license, let it be a bidding process. If it goes to $100,000 for a license, so be it. But let it be a bidding process and only one license for that dispensary. And then monitor how it's going to be. Look from the front where it's going to be. You have to do all of that as well. As far as delivery is concerned into our town, I think that's another mistake. If the youth can go on to Amazon or onto what other mail order and order this and have it delivered. It's very difficult to stop it. It's very difficult to find it in a UPS shipped shipped box or some other kind of box. And the people who want this, and I really request an additional couple of minutes, if you would please permit. Thank you, one and all. I think that that's very difficult. It increases the access, and the doctor was eloquent with his reasons as to why we do not want to let our children have that. My children are grown, thank God, and thank God they didn't get into it. But I got to tell you, there's a lot of other mothers and fathers that can't say that. So I think that it would be we would be irresponsible as a community to allow that to happen. And lastly, I think that it is a gateway to stronger, quote, drugs, if you will. It's something that is increased, as my understanding is, from the 1980s. And I think an expert that I was talking to told me that in the 1980s, 1 gram of THC, and I'm not exactly sure what that is, but it's not the good stuff. It's a gram back then was very much lower than it is now. It's much 24 to 30% higher in potency. So what was okay back when folks in my generation were growing up and becoming the flower children, it was a lot less harmful. Now they think it's okay to let their children. No, we've got to do something about that. So I think in summary, we need to put the brakes on this. And thank you all for showing up. But I'm really disappointed that there aren't more of us Corte Maderans that are going to stand up and say what we think, believe, and want for this town. We're going to have another Dixie Cup type of situation with that monstrosity that got built over here on Tamil Vista. So I think that we need to do something at the get-go, and we're there now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lucinda.
Good morning. My name is Monica Malone. I have lived in Corte Madera for over 20 years, and I was raised 2 miles from here. I went to Redwood High School and all the public schools in this area. So I'm fairly familiar with what it was like in the 80s and what is like now, because I have a 16-year-old daughter that is currently attending Redwood. This may be an unpopular opinion in this room, but I can tell you that my daughter can get anything she wants at that school. She has a classmate who is just in rehab for cocaine addiction. I'm not advocating that our kids go out and do drugs. I don't want that at all. But cocaine is not legal, and he was able to get this with no problem. Often they're getting it from their parents' sock drawers, from their parents' medicine cabinets. And my basic point, I would have to say, is that if Colonial Liquors across the street can sell alcohol, cigarettes, lottery tickets, if we have coffee houses all over the place, wine bars all over the place, these have the same kinds of regulations and age limits and everything else that marijuana has now. It is legal. We voted on it. Do I want my town to be overrun with pot stores? No, I don't. But I've also been to marijuana dispensaries in Oregon and Washington. Some of them look really crappy, and some of them you can't even walk in the door without them processing a photo ID. So if my daughter walked into Colonial Liquors and wanted to buy a fifth of vodka, they wouldn't let her. We do have a small community. They know her. She goes down there for popsicles all the time. The waiters at DJs know her. They're not going to sell her anything. And the same, I think, would be true of a marijuana dispensary in our town. Like I said, it is legal. We voted for it, and I understand the risks, and I appreciate the doctor's comments on the risks to the teenage brain. I completely agree. I guess it's not a matter of agreement, it's a matter of fact. But my daughter and I have had these conversations. I'm lucky that she doesn't drink, she doesn't smoke pot, she doesn't do anything else. She doesn't want to. I'm very, very lucky. But I think that is an issue to be raised between parents and their children. And also, there are going to be some children that have a genetic predisposition toward self-medicating, toward addiction, and toward mental health issues for that self-medication. And I think that is, in this case, the greater issue than whether or not there is a dispensary, whether it is labeled, whether it is no signage, whatever kind of dispensary it is. I don't think it's going to stop our young people from getting what they want to get. So I appreciate everybody's comments here today. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Phyllis Galanis, and I do live in Corte Madera. I may be one of the few people, maybe I'm the only person in this room. I do have a marijuana card. I do use the CBD cream because of back pain that I have, and I find it really helpful. So, and I do go to Fairfax. And now, you know, I'm able to drive to Fairfax. That's no problem. But I'm thinking, you know, there might come a time when I wouldn't be able to. And the cream would still help, but not to the point where I could drive to Fairfax. Who knows? So I think being able to have a delivery service could be helpful. I'm also a psychotherapist, and I have been working with people who have addictions for a long time. I absolutely know it is a fact. Marijuana does have a different effect on the growing brain, and it is to be avoided at all costs. So there, I'm of two minds here. I do not want to see dispensaries. We tried that. We had one over where, close to where my office, excuse me, was at, let's see, I think the dispensary was at 500 Tamil Vista. And it was right next to a not a gym, but a place where kids would go for what was gymnastics. And the smell was so bad that in the restrooms over there, the parents were having a difficult time, and their kids were asking, "What is that? Mom, what is that smell?" So it was very strong, and it was within the same, building. It wasn't in the same location. It wasn't in the gymnastics area, but still, it was definitely a problem. I don't want to see that happen again. And I do agree that when something's easy to get, people, kids, whatever, are going to be more inclined to go where it's closer. And yeah, I know they can get anything they want in Redwood, probably Hall, as a matter of fact. So I'm not naive. But I do want to see an ability for us to access the marijuana creams. They have a minuscule amount of THC in them to help the CBD actually work, but they aren't psychoactive. And I think for people like me and people like kids who have seizures and whatever, it really is a beneficial drug.
Thank you.
My name is Don Turry. I live in Larkspur, and I've lived in this area for 30 years. I used to go to the dispensary she was talking about down on Tamil Vista. It was double doored to get in, to get your medical supplies. There's no way anybody under 21 could even get in the place. And you had a big security guard there, bigger than any football player you see on the field. And so, there used to be several dispensaries, one in Sausalito. The one probably on Tamil Vista was shut down because by air it was within 600 feet of Redwood, which now that's the dispensary. So, I've seen us going backwards here in this field. And if you make it harder for people to get their medical supplies, then they'll be breaking the law doing something else. Like, who knows where they go to get it then? I mean, you know, at one time, there were forests of marijuana growing up in the watershed here. I mean, 10,000 plants or more. I mean, the cartel was up there just doing whatever they wanted just about until they got discovered. Now, I've been to other states, and who would think Nevada? Nevada? A walk-in storefront, a beautiful building. I mean, they must have spent $1 million on this building. It is downtown within a rock's throw of the casinos. Another double door. You got to get it, no matter if my age, you show your ID that you're over 21, that gets you into the second door. Of course, they also have more security in Nevada than anywhere else in the world. You know, you drop a bad word on somebody there, you're liable to see 3 cops around you, and I hate to tell you what could happen to you then. Well, I know our vote counts. Sometime, sure didn't this year for president, but in the Marin, 2/3 of the people voted yes. Well, the majority don't rule, do they? No, it's a few people that decide what they want to do, even though the vote was more of a majority than ever. Well, that's what I've got to say for right now, and I hope things get better, because right now it doesn't look that way. Why should I have to go to Fairfax when it was right down there at Dixie Cup or Tamil Vista? But, you know, I don't think anybody much in this room voted yes. Well, thank you for listening.
Thank you.
My name's Arthur Young. I live 2 blocks away. I've lived there for 37 years. In 1863, a tall, lanky guy by the name of Abraham Lincoln stood up addressing a crowd, and he said, "If you call a tail a leg, how many legs does a dog have? 5? No. Calling a tail a leg, don't make it a leg." It's been interesting to observe that there are people here with professional backgrounds, there are people here with personal passions. No one has mentioned any legitimate, recognized scientific research. So, to my ears, a lot of the comments here are worthy of the individuals because they're concerned citizens, but they don't measure up to what's reality in the research world. And so I would hope that whatever the town does, there are ample subsections or, you know, elements in reports of different subject matter that shows the research to back that up. Now, we also know that any good scientist can prove anything he wants because you can doctor research in terms of how you present it. And I don't in any way want to dismiss as individuals the people who have very strong opinions in this area. I think you're wrong. I have a very good friend. He's turning 80 this year. And for most of the last 17, 18 years, he has been in tremendous pain. And his wife, they have 3 children. One of his children is a senior officer in a police unit. His wife is strongly against marijuana, and so he has never used it as a medicinal aid in whatever form. A year ago, out of abject pain, he finally broke down. He's living a comfortable life for the first time in 16, 17 years. Do you, as a citizen, want to deny a fellow citizen the ability to simply conduct their life with the potential of being less pain-free. I'm just going to stop there and maybe come back next time. Thank you very much for your concern.
Thank you.
I'm Peggy Burnett, Corte Madera. I was wondering, can I ask a question of the psychiatrist? Is it not true that the psychoactive form of marijuana is different than the form of marijuana that's used for pain control?
If you wouldn't mind coming up to the mic and answering that, that'd be great. Thank you for providing your expertise.
The THC is definitely used for pain control, and so I mean that's and there is evidence to support that, and I hear a lot of patients report about CBD for pain control, which is the less psychoactive drug that's common in marijuana these days, and the CBD I don't believe there's as much research on it, but I mean you do hear a lot of anecdotes about it for pain control. It would be a less of a concern from a psychoactive point of view. That's the short of it. Thanks.
Thank you.
I have one other question.
Sure.
Oh,
Go for it.
unrelated issue. I'm sort of thinking about the for people that need medical marijuana, you think about their sort of ability to procure a prescription or to procure the medicine in a reasonable way. And it sounds like the delivery issue may be become a state law. And I wonder, though, about the 18 versus 21 for the delivery issue, and that if it would be possible for either medical or non-medical delivery, that if it can the city regulate an over 21 limit? That would just be one question I would have, given because unfortunately, I mean, although there is medical use of marijuana that's legitimate, I mean, as I was saying earlier, most of the cards are not written by scrupulous doctors, and and so there's obviously, I said the vast majority of cards are not written appropriately, unfortunately.
So if I want to make sure I get your question right, you're asking, does the town have the ability to restrict delivery to only 21-year-olds?
For medical and non-medical, yeah.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Okay.
I just wanted to make one clarification. So the state law, essentially, you could get a state license to be a delivery service or a medicinal or recreational, but the town then, so someone could have a license and say, I'm an operating delivery service, but then the town would have to administer our own license to allow them to operate officially from town as a business. So you have to get your state license and you'd have to get your town license. So if we say no licenses, then effectively they wouldn't be able to operate as a business out of Corte Madera. Does that make sense?
But in terms of delivering to Corte Madera,
We couldn't regulate that essentially.
I see. So, okay.
Yeah. Do you mind using the microphone, sir? You're welcome. Thank you.
My name is Alan Barrett. I've lived in the city for 25 plus years, live on Grove Avenue. I came in a little bit late to this, but the one thing that, there's a couple things. First, the state law right now, we all voted and approved marijuana as for legality, both recreational and medicinally. We've been involved in the medicinal side for many years. My wife is a cancer survivor, utilized marijuana for pain relief, ability to eat, and basically is around today. We believe the combination of Western and Eastern medicine, and marijuana was a big factor medicinally. We're very strong supporters of that. And there is the combination of the THC, which is the psychoactive, and the CBD. The combination of the two in the right combination medicinally is very important. It's both of them. It's not just the individual side of things. And what you've got right now with the state regulations is you have the state and 5 different agencies, and maybe more, that are involved in the legal implementation of the law right now. And it's very complex and difficult. Now you've got and I appreciate if you just give me a minute or two more, because I'm going to probably run over a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But the point here is delivery service, and I hear on people's concerns about the kids, because I totally believe that the youth has issues. They're going to get it. We all were young one time, and you find ways. But from the delivery point and the dispensary side, you have to be 21. You have to show your driver's license. You have to show a form to be able to get into the dispensary. And so people understand, even from the delivery side, because frankly, we get the medicinal delivered, because there's a lot of people that can't go to dispensaries who are older and need the medicinal marijuana, and they have it delivered. But to have it dropped off, you have to, that person who's getting it has to show their driver's license to that delivery service to be able to get that product delivered. So I believe that the youth is going to do what they're going to do, and you can do the best to raise your kids and give them the understanding. But if they really want to do something, they'll be able to. So in terms of the regulations, I believe there's enough state regulations and complexities right now that for the cities to get involved, I just think it's a mistake at this point. There's enough regulation going on. And by the way, it's going to take a year to 2 to sort through from a regulatory process what is working, how it's going to best work, and what the right methods and avenues to do that. But we voted as a state to implement legal marijuana and cannabis. And I believe that both the medical and the recreational side, we're focused on medical, but it's the will of the people. And just the last thing that I want to say is that we're all trying to do the right thing for our community and our people. And the one thing that you see is some people drink, some people do other things. There's laws for tobacco, for alcohol. There's now laws that are being implemented for cannabis. And as long as the laws are upheld and we support how it is done, the most important thing is for all of us to allow people to live their lives the best that they can. The medical side, I believe, needs more testing, and you can't do any of that. A lot of the testing that really needs to be done from a medical side, which I believe needs to be done. My brother and sister-in-law are doctors, and the discussions we have are, they don't disagree that marijuana may help and may not. They just say that you don't have the full 10 years of testing like you do with the FDA. You have GWH for epilepsy. You now have finally some approved methods, but you don't have the full spectrum, because from a federal side, you can't have the testing at the level that needs to be done. So I believe that in the course of the next several years, with proper testing, there will be certain things that will be proven not to work. But ultimately, the combination, there are benefits on the medicinal side. And I'm just hoping that people understand that there's no intent to have our kids and the populace just go crazy with cannabis, but just to enable it to be what it can be is the most important thing to the community. Thank you.
Can I ask you a question specifically on delivery? Because I'm curious how this would work if you know. If I was a bartender and I have a 21-year-old son, and I know the ability to check a person's driver's license, there's a little bit of an art to that. It's easier now because licenses are more clearly marked. But as a bartender, bartenders are trained, how to find a fake ID. So if a UPS driver is now being held responsible for making sure that person is giving them an accurate driver's license, is
here's the funny little secret.
Yeah.
UPS drivers can't deliver it. It's the delivery side of the business is regulated, that you have to have specific licenses, specific types of truck. specific methods of delivery. You can only carry a certain amount of product in your truck, and it's only certain businesses that have to be approved from a delivery perspective to do that. So, all I can tell you is there are several people within certain states that we're aware of that don't have the ability to get medicinal marijuana in those states. And we are aware that things get sent to those people through, like you're saying, the UPS and FedEx, whatever it may be.
Right.
But the way the state is setting up the regulations, there's a separate requirements for manufacturing, for delivery, for the dispensaries, and you have to have, the tests and the requirements to get those licenses are very restrictive. And so those businesses are limited. Now, the state right now is going through where initially the delivery, the cities were going to be able to limit which cities could go. In San Francisco is one that didn't allow outside delivery. If you had to have the business in the city deliver, the state in the most recent laws that were released is now outside businesses can deliver to anywhere that in the communities, even if the community doesn't have a dispensary and the likes. But those are licensed, vetted delivery businesses. So I understand your concern that we're not going to put it on those people, but those businesses are going to getting, some of them that are not doing it properly are going to get shut down and fined. The state is being very rigid in terms of, and by the way, that's a problem too that you're running into. Some of these people are trying to do the medicinal and the right thing. The regulatory process right now is both very constrictive, restrictive, and expensive for people that are trying to do the right thing to turn it into a bigger business kind of a model as opposed to what's going on. But that's why my commentary is that it's going to take 2 to 3 years plus to work through what is the right way and not. And everybody's contributions are important. I'm not, some people are not for it, some are against. And there's just so much regulation going on right now that it's more illegal today, actually, I believe, than it was a year ago before these state laws really came into being because of all the regulations. And it's not a perfect process right now, but the state is working to try and make it that way. And hopefully there's input like this community and others to do so. And my point to you here in Corte Madera is that there's so much going on with these different agencies at the state level. To add another layer, you're better off not spending the time, money, and effort letting the next couple of years wash through and determining how the real law is going to be, because at the end of the day, state law will predominate over the local. And what's happened in like Colorado and the likes is they basically put that forth that counties and cities do not have any control. You have to follow the state law. And they've been able to set that up in a way that they haven't had all these kind of issues because everybody's operating under the same jurisdictional laws. And what we've got right now in the California, you've got many communities that are no, absolutely nothing. And then you've got many that are, yes, you can. So you've got all these things, and the delivery guys are trying to go around and do things. You've got all these things, and it's time, money, and effort. And my feeling is that at the end of the day, if we let the state's rules and regs work their way through in the next 12 to 24 months in particular, it'll work its way through, and then the cities can figure out, okay, what works for us directly.
Great, thank you.
Thank you for my time.
Bill, can we follow up on his comment?
You can, if you could use the microphone.
Just to follow up on his comment, no, I forgot it. Yes, thank you. With all the regulations that are being considered, both at the local level and at the state level and county level, what would be the problem with setting up prohibition within Corte Madera for the next 3 years and then revisit those ordinances after some of these things have been settled and picking the best that will work best for Corte Madera? I think that we're getting pushed because this moratorium is going to expire to do everything right now. And what would be the harm if we let things kind of settle, continued with a prohibition, make an ordinance for that, but then let things settle and then find out what will work best for Corte Madera and revisit it in 3 to 5 years when things should have settled.
That's certainly an option. And like I said before, the one deadline we have, and all jurisdictions have the same deadline, is September 19th, 2019. So if we don't establish an ordinance at that point, then we fall back and we follow the state rules. And the state rules, allow, we described what the state rules were. So we can, but that is certainly an option. The town can draft an ordinance, and it wouldn't be another moratorium. It would be an ordinance that says this is what is allowed in the town of Corte Madera for cannabis use, cannabis businesses. And that ordinance could go on, as long as we want it to, and we could, years later, we could revisit that ordinance and say, okay, here's what other states have done, here's more information, let's look at that ordinance. Also, I believe that if we create an ordinance and then 2 years later the state changes the rules, we may have to fall under the new rules of the state, which could be more liberal or more conservative in terms of cannabis businesses and use.
But we would still have to generate an ordinance prior to September of 2019.
Yes, no matter what, we have to do something by September 2019. Unless if we do nothing, then we fall back on the state rules.
Right, but if we do something and then that ordinance is what we as a town can change, wouldn't that be the simpler way to go?
That's definitely a way to go, yes.
Okay.
You
And
want
the
to
other
chat?
comment that, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead, Sean.
I was going to follow up. So the city of San Anselmo, in their ordinance, they have a provision at the end of their code. And again, the ordinance is specific to some of the planning and the zoning law, right? Where can you do it? If you have a license, will you be allowed to operate out of a specific location, right? And so there's very much of a process in which you would actually be able to go to the town and get a permit to do so, should we allow for these uses. So San Anselmo, at the end of their code, allows for somebody to apply to the city to change the zoning law to allow for a business to operate in San Anselmo. So it's a very specific part of their code that says if you decide you think you can get the votes, essentially you could come and change their law. And again, I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with the public process, but that requires the same kind of thing that we're going through today: public outreach, presentation, and application. So there is definitely a process to change those things.
Can you jump up there for just one?
The other question or statement that I would have before I leave the podium is that I have to go to another city, San Rafael or Terra Linda, to fulfill my prescriptions, or I can have mail order.
Right.
But that's not an imposition. You don't have to provide it in the physical locality, I don't think.
You mean if you have to get a prescription from Kaiser, you have to leave Corte
That is
Madera to get
correct.
it? Yeah.
That is correct.
Sure.
So I think, again, that's my choice. I have Kaiser as my insurance, so my choice, but that's one of the things I have to deal with. If I want to do marijuana, that's my choice, and I should have to go to wherever it's being sold. But I don't think we as a community need to provide that access.
Thank you.
With regard to the zoning and the issues, just from a real estate perspective, to change the zoning ordinances in this city and to get permits and approvals, it's a very difficult process. And I got to believe there's only a couple locations, even with the state regulations in place. Are there even, how many areas where we could, if there was a dispensary that was chosen, there's probably 1 or 2 areas within the city that are even available that could make sense, if at all. So, and if it wasn't zoned, you'd have to change it, which it's not going to happen. It's very difficult because people will not allow that. But
Right.
what was stated about the delivery for your prescription drugs, and that's the same kind of thing that I was talking about with the delivery services. They're regulated in the state for cannabis and that, so it's the same thing. Certain people can't go out and do that, but if the state voted it's legal now both recreational and medicinal. But I see, and again, we're focused, and people can do the recreational, but we're focused on the medicinal side. We see that there's a lot of people that just don't have access, or frankly, a lot of us are not going to feel comfortable walking into a dispensary. Okay, there's just a lot of people that just don't want that image of themselves doing that and just won't. But if they can order the creams or the medicines and have it delivered to their house, they're going to do that. And if it's going to help them medicinally, and it's legal, by the way, for them to do that, they should have that ability. And I don't think our town should be the restrictive note there. And in terms of the dispensaries, I just hope that if there's a concern, and there are a lot of people that seem to have that, which is fine, that if there's a location that somebody would want to do a dispensary that's legally zoned there, then okay, fine. Or then if you're thinking of even doing something, which again, I think we should let the state's regulations flush through, then the town should have a separate vote, then put it on this town's ballot if you really want to go that far and see what the town does. Because the people in the privacy of their own voting booth, you'll see how this town rolls that way. And I just want to make sure that people have access, they follow the rules and the law, and I think that we can move forward along that path.
Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Sierra Dooley, and I'm from Santa Rosa, and I just wanted to give some outside perspective. So I currently work in the cannabis industry. I work for a wholesale cannabis distribution operation, so we're the ones that deliver product to delivery services and to retailers as well. And it's also a consulting and lobbying firm that specializes in the cannabis industry. So earlier this year, the company participated in the National American Business Awards. And so this recognizes accomplishments and contributions of companies and businesses that are conducted in the United States. And so Pacific Expeditors, the cannabis distribution operation, we were actually awarded a Stevie Award. And this was for Best Small Transportation Company. And this is competing with all industries, so it's not cannabis specific. So my point being is that cannabis businesses can be a professional operation. If you do open up your ordinance, the application process can be formed, so you require a plan of what the applicant will do for Corte Madera. They can outline their safety plans, their neighborhood contributions, as well as you can authorize only certain types of cannabis business operations. So it sounds like the retailer or dispensary option may be more of a debate here, but the delivery options, so the non-storefront delivery options, may be a good fit for your town. They don't have to only deliver in Corte Madera, but they can service all of the Bay Area, and this can maintain anonymity for patients by having their medicine delivered privately to their homes rather than having to go into a public space. Further, the sales tax revenue you generate can be substantial by servicing all the surrounding areas. The crime concerns that I've been hearing today, they're very valid. But what I've been seeing across California and in other states as well is that most crime related to the cannabis industry are due to illegal operations that take place. Santa Rosa does have many cannabis businesses, and I don't have any fear walking downtown at night from a restaurant to my car. And again, this goes back to that this is an emerging industry that contains many working professionals who are trying to provide additional livelihoods and create economic activities that benefit their communities. Thank you.
Can I ask you another question?
Yeah.
Since you're in the business.
Yeah.
So am I able to go online and purchase something from your business?
No, currently we
Okay.
do not have that ability. The regulations that are set up are very strict as far as advertisement goes, so you can't typically just go online like a Amazon or an eBay. That's illegal. And for us, since we're a distribution operation, so we don't deliver to consumers,
Okay.
eventually the retailers that we partner with, we may be able to set up so that they have a portal so that they can see parts of, what's in our warehouse, and they can set up, they can place orders for us to then deliver to their retail operation, wherever that may be.
Okay, so you're like in our slide, you're a business that transports, you're a wholesaler that transports to retailers. Would that be a
Yes.
way to summarize it? Okay.
Yes,
Got it.
correct.
And do you have a sense of, any idea what your zoning is in Santa Rosa?
I should know this.
Industrially
I
zoned or
think
commercially zoned?
So typically for distribution operations, it seems to be in more of the general industrial. For non-storefront delivery, that's really up to you. But again, it seems the most consistent is general industrial, light industrial type
Right.
of areas. And then for retail in Santa Rosa, they have like an over concentration clause in it. So there's only so much zoning that they have set up that have available real estate, and then within that, the stores cannot be within 600 feet of another cannabis retailer as well.
Right.
So they've set up a like a certain set of criterion for applicants, and you get points based off of that, and whoever gets the most points wins.
Okay.
Technically, so, but there's, they work very closely with the community, like Corte Madera is attempting to do with you guys. So I would just continue doing research, outreach, things like that. Look at surrounding areas, not just in Marin County, but look at Sonoma County as well, Mendocino County, those areas.
And I'm assuming you have a use permit, or do you have a use permit?
Yeah, we have a zoning clearance and
Zoning
everything.
clearance,
Yeah.
And you have particular security measures that you must
yeah.
abide by, and does the city of Santa Rosa inspect those security measures? Or do you
Well, the state mandates security requiremements as well as the city of Santa Rosa as well, so they can go and, double check that.
Great, thank you.
Absolutely.
You're getting your exercise.
Although the lady who just spoke does not deliver, there are online delivery portals that
Right.
in Marin that you can go to. And you go, it's like a menu, it is like an Amazonish kind of a menu where you
Right.
go down and you pick what you want, and then you punch it in your address, they deliver. The person that ordered it has to be the one at the door. The person that ordered it has to show their driver's license and that they're over 21.
Okay.
And then it gets delivered. And there's state regulations in terms of how that has to operate. So even though she doesn't, it is, so anybody
Right.
in Corte Madera can go online. There's several places. And if you want to see how that looks, you can go online and find a couple of them. Okay?
Thank you. Okay, no problem.
Again, I'm from Corte Madera. While we may have many regulations, we don't have sufficient monitoring of those regulations. And a very good example of that is what the doctor mentioned in terms of people who have cards. I know of 2 people who have a card who should not have a card. I am totally in favor of medical marijuana for those who need it, for those whose pain is eased by it. But until we're in a better position to make sure we're monitoring that, we have to be careful with that. The other thing I'd like to see Corte Madera do, and I know this is yet another thing that we have to consider, is putting the negative aspect on the use of marijuana, just as we have with smoking cigarettes, the nicotine from cigarettes. That negative aspect has helped to curb cigarette smoking. Let's do that with marijuana as well, please.
Lisa Spangler, Corte Madera. It's not that I'm against medical marijuana. It's just that a lot of doctors are not equipped and feel that they can responsibly prescribe it. And they don't know what you're getting. There's no way to write a script and get it filled. I know that my tenant grows it because he says he gives it to his lot of elderly friends who are in pain, and he helps them that way. But who knows what kind of marijuana he's growing and how he takes it and how they take it. I've know people who want to eat it, so then they have to process it with butter, and it's a long process. So I'm not against medical marijuana. I just think that California cannot do the work that the drug administration should do, and that this is a bigger problem in our country. It's a federal problem. I mean, when money cannot be banked, you cannot check income, all this, and we don't, we're a little town, we won't get that big into it, but I really think that the doctor makes some good points. And I know that marijuana helps people. And if you, thank God business is getting into it so that when business gets into it, it's more regulated. They do the proper things, yes. But also, I really agree that we have to put the negative onto marijuana. You know, just like we would with opiate drugs. They help, but there is a negativity to that. And we have, you know, you are the leaders, and we have to lead. We have to, through our policies, really show what's right and what's wrong. And you know, I didn't vote for marijuana, but, you know, plenty of people did. I go with it, but that doesn't mean that people all of a sudden on the ferry on the way back from a game, we smelled all this marijuana. A guy came up from the transportation organization and said, you cannot smoke that on the boat. And a bunch of people were saying, well, it's legal. Well, we don't want to smell your marijuana. You're not supposed to smoke on the boat, so you're smoking. You know, I mean, you've got to make it so that this is still a controlled substance in the way that it's sold. And I have to say that I have property up in Sonoma County. Everywhere I go, people are growing marijuana. And we never had a problem in our little town of 25 homes or less until marijuana became legal. And now Sonoma County is trying to stay on top of these people who are now growing marijuana on their property. They're bringing in tons of workers, so you've got all this traffic, and dealers are coming in. And they're really ruining our little town. And so it's up to us to have to go to the county and tell them what's going on, but we want to be anonymous because we don't want to get in trouble or have trouble. So there's a lot to consider. I don't want people, you know, calling in my tenants because they're growing, and, you know, maybe they accuse me of doing it. I just think that there needs to be real boundaries to it, and it needs to be enforced.
Thank you. Okay. No problem, no problem.
Arthur Young, still living in Corte Madera. If you were to go through a transcript of everything that's been said in the last hour and 3/4 and yellowed out or redlined out what's a supposition, what's fear-based, what's an anecdote, what's a personal opinion, and what would stand up in a court of law, I think it would be a very short transcript. And I think that it would be really useful if we, as a community, would veer toward the non-fear-based, more enlightened, more research-based element for this discussion. I would just ask a question of everybody here who feels passionately about the issue, because you are taking a piece of your morning off to be here. How many of you went to God? My God is Google. How many went to Google to research the opinion that you are speaking strongly of, to see what is the, I can't use the word truth, but what are some majority opinions? As we were sitting here, I went to Google on my phone and I tried to research bases on the safety of marijuana smoking as opposed to alcohol smoking on the road. It's a fair question. I'd ask you to do it. I'd ask you to look at the organizations that have titles like National Association for the Prevention of something having to do with marijuana or alcohol, and then look at what they say and consider, is this legitimate research or is it fear-based assumption? We can all get along and find a way to provide freedom for those who want it in a certain way, and safety and health, no, just safety concerns for others. I don't feel that I have the right to tell somebody else how to live their life. As a part-time job, I serve as a school crossing guard. And I see the way adults drive up to the schools. And if I had my own way, I'd take about 22% of the driving public off the road, at least for a month, and have them learn what the value is of having the glory of having a driver's license in this country. I really would urge us that we just don't operate from fear. Thanks.
Thank you.
I don't think we're operating from fear. I think there's a lot of unknowns about this. I mean, my father was in World War II. He said people were smoking marijuana. You know, I mean, it's always been around. But now it's stronger, and the doctor relates to that. We've got bigger populations. I went to Redwood. Yeah, you could get anything you want, but a lot of people didn't get what they wanted either. I just, I'm a school teacher, and I know that those parents, they're doing what they do, and I don't think that's being a role model. But you should, smoking's bad, and whatever you put in your lungs is probably anything smoky's not good. I mean, we had to close the schools when there was smoke from the fires down here, and they were blowing. So it's not from fear, and we're community, and yes, that's why we're here to work this out. But we also have to have rules that we live by that are based upon what everyone's input is. And I think that's why we're here. And I think that you've gotten a lot of good information that you can synthesize to make these right, where we all can feel good about this happening in our community. So that's what I'd like to address. Thank you.
Thank you.
At the risk of getting into trouble from my colleague on the town council, David Kuhnhart, Corte Madera, on the town council. I have not reached any conclusions. I'm here to make two suggestions. One is, I was here at the Wednesday and all day today listening carefully, particularly to those who have medical and medical-related professional opinions, both pro and con, and I found that particularly helpful, but I'm not sure that the town is actually going to be able to act on the medical details. So here's my suggestion. One of the things that I'm hearing a lot is that the quality of available product is still in doubt. And it is absolutely the case that the FDA should be doing this work, and they're not. And so here in California and in Colorado and Oregon and so forth, there are people who are trying to. It would seem to me that a license that could be legitimate somewhere in Marin County would be a license to do testing and quality control and certification and labeling. And that seems to me to be a missing piece of the business environment, if you will, potentially a valuable one, and certainly would help those who have good and bad reasons to use, to understand what it is that they're using and what effects that it might have. So it's a different, you listed it as a potential license, but there's been no conversation about it. The only other comment is a potential idea for addressing the issue of indoor grows. In Corte Madera, the building code says for any new construction or more than 50% renovation, one must put in a sprinkler system. It wouldn't be too difficult an ad to say that you've got to do any indoor grow properly licensed as to electrical and put in a sprinkler system. Thank you very much. And also, just another thank you to everybody who's come out and spoken. It's not easy to do, and it is very helpful to all of us to think about this. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Okay. Last call? There's still donuts left also.
One other thing that I think is something we ought to consider is that as you've seen these, and I'm not sure, I think it's called the e-cigarettes or whatever, and then it's the flavored whatever goes into them, the Juul or whatever. As you can tell, I'm not very expert in all this, but I think that the way it has been included in the news, fake or not, whatever, is that this has caused an alarming number of teenagers getting into this habit and becoming addicted. And I think that going back to my original comment about this cannabis, marijuana, being part of a gateway into other drugs, it's going to develop where there's going to be all these flavors and what have you to make it more, what should I say, amenable to one's particular likes and desires. And I think that that's going to be the next level. And if it's not contained and not maintained as far as some kind of regulation, it's going to become even worse than it already is. Thank you.
I do understand also from the smoking side of things, but just to be clear, the things on the medicinal for a lot of the people that we're dealing with in that area, there's sprays, there's the creams, there's edibles, and amazingly, the one that is helpful to a lot of older people that is the best is suppositories. Things like that, which it's not smoking, because there is the concern, like you said, of smoking and the impact to health and lungs. So I just want to make sure that people understand from the medicinal side, at least, there's those methods that are very effective, okay?
So that's why people shouldn't be growing it and using the excuse that they're helping their older people get well. You know, that's why I'm saying that I'm not against medical marijuana or cannabis, whatever. But if you do have these dispensaries, you have to have some guidelines for it, you know, and you can't just then say, well, anybody can grow, anybody can get a card, or we're going to allow this, you know, with these excuses of, well, I need it for my pain, when you can actually get it. I think it's medicine. No, you don't grow it because it's your medicine. That's all.
Thank you for coming. Thank you. All right, thank you all. Sean and I will be here if you want. If you have more questions or comments, or anybody wants to share their business card, and I have my business cards here. And thank you all for coming, and keep an eye on the website. Have a good rest of your day.